Hello and welcome. Yeah, this week is week 7 on my 50 State ZenQuiltz journey. And this week I'm heading to Connecticut. So go ahead and offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this creative time. And thank you for joining me on this adventure, whether it be for just 1 week or all 50. I appreciate you. So here are the colors and the tools that I'll be using this week that were listed on our supply list. So I'm just going to go ahead and push these out of the way. And I'm going to leave behind my ruler and pencil and tile. And once again, this week, we're going to start with offering that 3/16 inch border all around our tile's edge. So just leaving little hash marks at 3/16 so that we can then go ahead and connect them to create a frame or border around our quilt. So once they're all laid, we're just going to create those hash marks, connect those hash marks side to side, forming that border around our tile's edge. And then once we have that frame connected or that border connected, I'm going to go ahead and from corner to corner, draw a diagonal line. And then turning my tile so that I can replicate that process so that I have a big X in the middle of my quilt. And by default, I will have found my center. And now that I've found my center, I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler and go side to side right through that center mark. So we have this X and this plus to create these big triangular spaces across the center of our tile. Yeah. So now what I'm going to do is the plus sign or the center lines that go side to side, I'm going to connect diagonally. So just laying my ruler diagonally from the corners of where that plus sign comes together with our framed edge, I'm going to draw a line right through the center of the quadrant of boxes that we've created. Yeah. So there we have it. We have this square now in the center of our tile with smaller triangles connecting all the way around the whole inner of our frame. Okay. So this week we're going to be creating our quilt just a little bit differently than we have been so far on this journey. We've been adding our color to our tile before we ever take our tangles into the mix. Well, this week, in order to create our fabric, we're going to go directly to our dark gray. Again, normally we're inking in our light gray, but we're going to go to our dark gray this week and offer the tangles inside of our spaces before we um, go to our color. So I'm going to start in this top left box. And in this top left box, I'm going to turn it so that my top side, my left side, is now my bottom. All right. So with this being my top left, I'm going to offer a rice shape in the peak of that triangle down to the bottom of that triangle. Okay. So that rice shape, I'm then going to stack another rice shape right on top of that. So another rice shape, which is now going into the valley of that triangular shape, and adding these rice shapes. And now that I have those rice shapes, I'm going to turn my tile to the left 90 degrees and add 2 more rice shapes into those triangles. I'm gonna turn my tile again 90 degrees to the left and add rice shapes in those triangles, bottom and top. So notice we're turning our tile and ignoring our side triangles and only working in the bottom and top. I'm going to do the same thing again, adding those rice shapes into those triangular spaces. Okay. So these rice shapes are going to be the beginnings of the Tangle Ahoy. So I chose Ahoy because it represents sailboats and water and waves, and Connecticut has 300 miles of coastline. So we're going to honor that coastline with a bit of a sailboaty expression and some water to boot. So now that we have these rice shapes on the right-hand side, we're going to start at the top and pull an arch down. So the right-hand side, we're arching down, and on the bottom, we're going to arch up. So let's do that again. Turning the tile, on the right-hand side, I'm arching down, and on the bottom, I'm arching up. Let's do that again. Rice shape, here's our top. The right-hand side, I'm going to start at the top and arch down. And at the bottom, I'm going to arch up. So now that we have the beginnings of our sailboat, on the left-hand side, we're going to ink our string line and then thinly aura 2 more times. So the left-hand side, we're going to ink our string line and then aura thinly 2 more times. Being mindful that you're always going to the left side of your rice shape to add these lines. The left side of the rice shape in each one of those expressions, adding those ink our string line and then aura 2 more times. So I'm going to call these three lines the beach. And on the beach, we're going to lay some waves. So each one of these lines that we just laid, which I'm going to call the beach, we're going to add two humps into that space right on top of that top line. So almost these half orbs that we're laying right on top of that beach. Our waves are rolling. It's a great day for sailing. So this is the Tangle Ahoy. So we've laid ahoy, our sailboat, our water, our waves, into each one of these triangles. And we still have some empty squares. So Connecticut is the nutmeg state. So inside of each of these triangular spaces that we still have, I'm just going to go ahead and scoosh some orbs into those spaces. So I'm going to do one big orb right up into the peak, and then allow whatever orbs that I have left in that space to fall and fill in to the right and left of that large center nutmeg that I've offered. So these are going to represent the nutmegs of the state. Yeah, just these beautiful orbs filling in that space. Of course, we have Connecticut, known for its maritime steamboats, anything really nautilus. Yeah. Of course, there's the lighthouses as well. I did not know that Connecticut had 300 miles of coastline. That I did not know. So that was pretty cool. Nice to honor that in our quilt. And this week's quilt pattern is inspired by the Workbasket book, not the puzzle this week. And interestingly enough, this is the first state that I've seen have more than one state name. Connecticut is also known as the Constitution State. So our Connecticut quilt is now all tangled up. And again, I mentioned, we're kind of operating backwards based on how we would have been working in the past. So we're going to be adding our color directly into our tangled spaces at this point. So I'm going to start with my Ahoy, and I'm going to make my sailboats red. So I'm using that 856, and I'm going to go ahead and offer that 856 or any red color that you're using or any color that you're using for your sailboat. Doesn't have to even be red. I'm going to offer a blending to that just so it's not too powerful and overtakes um, the whole quilt, but always an option, right? So I'm going to go right into that sailboat shape with my blended red. And once again, I'm not being concerned about the smoothness of how this ink is laid, even though my tingling is done, right? I still want a bit of variation into that color palette. I still want some depth and some lightness that occurs by default of how these colors are blending from my blender. Can always add more as I go, if that's what speaks to me, right? But I'm only focusing that red right into what I'm going to call that sailboat space of each Ahoy expression. So we did our tangling first because one, our tangling this week is much more pronounced, right? We're using it as the pattern itself, not just kind of a background to our quilt. It is the whole quilt patch or makeup in this particular block. And because it's our focal point, it gives us a bit more space, right, to be a bit more particular about our coloring. Time, just allowing yourself the opportunity to just escape into the practice that you're doing, right? No need to rush. Okay. So I'm going to go to my 991, that yellow that I've chosen, and I'm going to make this yellow be the sunshine that's shining through the sails and sky of this particular tangle. So I'm going to focus this yellow right here into this triangular space on either side of our waves and our rice shape, and I'm going directly in. So I'm going to take my marker directly to that space, adding that beautiful bright sunshine to the sky on this gorgeous day for sailing. And then I'm going to that 451, that light blue. And that light blue, I'm going to go ahead and put into my rice shape and my wave, or the sky behind my sunshine, however you look at it. So again, I'm going direct. This is such a light color. It's not going to overpower the material. I'm just going to have this subtle blue sky to my background, to each one of those spaces. I'm going to go back to my yellow. And remember how I said I'm going to call this the beach. So I'm going to go ahead and direct again, go back to that yellow and just offer a sandy beach. Now, once I get this yellow laid out in each one of these spaces, I'm going to offer a little bit of brown right on top of this with the blender to kind of just tone down the brightness of the yellow and bring it a bit more into beach tones. So I'm going to take that 947, offer just a little palette, and with the blender, I'm just going to go ahead and tone that yellow down ever so slightly, making sure that your blender is clean from the other colors the red that we've used. So just side to side on either side, I'm gonna let that center be the yellow as it stands, but just brushing a little of that brown color on each side to just again tone that down, kind of bring it to the beach, give it a bit more of a less yellow expression so that it doesn't match the sun. So we have just a little white space left in our Ahoy, and that's going to be that blue, that 526. And I'm going to blend this in so that I can kind of keep it toned down. Once again, make sure that your blender is clean. And I'm going to take my palette and grab it onto my blender, but then I'm going to pull it out a bit so that I don't have a lot of ink still left on the blender and I can be a bit more subtle with these waves. So I'm going to take that blended color, that darker blue, right into those waves, and you can always add more, much more difficult, of course, to take away. So just a bit more of a subtly darker blue into the waves versus that sky behind again. You can always add more if you think that contrast is too subtle for you. So our ahoy is all colored up, and we have this beautiful material for our Connecticut quilt of sailboats and water and beaches, and such a colorful quilt, and offered again completely different than in previous weeks. So our nutmeg, I'm not going to focus on the whole tangle or on the individual units of the tangle. I'm going to operate just as we did in the past. I'm going to lay my brown palette down onto my acetate, and I'm going to make sure my blender is clean, and once again just offer a little bit of a cleansing off to the side of that color, just so it's not so saturated when I come into my space. And I'm just going to allow that color to, again, lay down however it lays. I'm going to embrace all of those dark patches versus light patches, and I'm going to honor that texture that's formed by this haphazard kind of way of laying color. Taking that blender and that color, circular motion I like to use just to kind of blend as I go, kind of pulling it out and manipulating that ink as I continue to use that circular motion all across that space. Again, kind of wiping my blender off on the side of the acetate. Always good. You know how we say, change that perspective, hold your tile out at arm's length. Ooh, ah, yeah. Up close and personal, we tend to not see what's not completed or what may be speaking to you. So I just moved my eyes away from kind of this haphazard way of laying this brown into our nutmeg sections, only to see a bright white space into our ahoy sections. Now I edit all of these videos, so I could have edited back and not shared that piece with you, but why not? We're all human. So yeah, I have a piece of the sky that is uncolored in my ahoy. So as soon as we're done laying our brown palette into our nutmeg, I'll go back and complete that sky vision into our ahoy. If you saw it as you were going through and you completed yours, that's great. If you were shaking your head at me saying, Sheila, that ahoy is not done, I appreciate your grace. Otherwise, if you just followed along with me and didn't question it, we'll head back there next. In the meantime, I'll just continue to add this beautiful texture into our nutmeg. So yeah, that white space in that ahoy definitely should not be there. So again, pulling that 451 or that light blue, whatever you're using, directly onto the tile, I'm going to go ahead and fill that extra white space. That's I'm going to call our sky around our sailboat. So we definitely do not want that white space, whatever color you choose to add to it. But our sailboat looks lost. Like it's only out to sea halfway if we don't have the sky around the other side. We have a ghosting sailboat. Yeah. Oh boy. It's all good. Now our ahoy is all done and our nutmeg is inked in. Yeah, much better. All right. So around my border this week, I'm going to go big and bold, really. Sticking with that kind of um, nautical maritime theme of the blues and reds of that expression. I'm going to add my darker blue into my corners. So that darker blue being the 526 for me. So directly onto that border material. I'm not going to blend this out. I'm going to go directly to my material or my tile and ink that in. And then I'm going to take that bright red, that 856, and again go directly to the edge. And although our red is the same red that we use in our sailboat, the sailboat's much more muted, right? Because we used our blender. So this border is really going to stick out and have a really big, bold voice. And I'm okay with that. I hope you are too. Again, you can always choose your own color scheme or palette as you go through this journey, right? These are just suggestions or supply list or just tools that I will be using. And each week I'm just trying to at least have some colors from previous weeks, right? So that although our quilts all have a unique, our blocks, I guess I should say, all have a unique voice, they have a similarity or a marriage in color. So they are all going to be a cohesive vision based on the similarity or commonality of having at least some colors similar or the same. And again, this is material, so we do not want to see that white deckled edge of our tile. We want to just pick that tile up and offer our ink right to the side to take care of that deckled edge so that there's no white when we place our quilt blocks next to each other when we're all done. Yeah. All right. So we're all ready to stitch our block together, making each one of these triangles, not each one of the individual units of our material. These are all the print of our material. So we're going big and we're going to sew each of the triangular spaces together. And again, I'm using that dark gray. So we're pretty much eliminating our light gray out of this week's expression or block. Just taking your time, being deliberate and intentional with each one of those staccato motions, adding that thread, one push of the needle up, down, and back up. Starting again, slow, deliberate, staccato motions. Don't try to hurry the process, just enjoy the process. breathing as you go. Check in on those shoulders. Have they crept up on you and tight against your ears? Yeah. Release those shoulders down. Maybe unhinge that jaw. Relax. A great opportunity when you're halfway through to pull your tile out at arm's length. Certainly you can ooh and ah, but see your why. See what a difference that little bit of stitching does to create the full vision of where we're headed with each of these quilts, yeah? That pen stitching, that's such a great detail to bringing these blocks to life. Otherwise, it's just different sections, different strings on a tile. This is the piece de la resistance, as they say, right? The thing that brings it all together. Once again, I'm not stitching the outside of my block just because, again, I'm not 100% sure how I'm bringing these individual blocks together into one unit of my frame. So I don't want to stitch just yet. If you're only doing one, or if it speaks to you, by all means, go for the stitching on the edge of each block as well. Um, who knows? I may end up going through and stitching all of those edge blocks together once I have it put together in the frame, or put together for framing, I guess I should say. But right now, I think I have a vision of maybe doing a knot connection to each edge of the block. Yeah. All right, so we're all stitched up. This week we have a little bit of a situation in that we individually colored our material for these Ahoy sections, yeah? And I'm not going to treat them any differently. So I chose to go with my 105, that kind of cobalt turquoise, that darker blue um, Prisma color, just to kind of, again, focus more on the pucker than I am on highlighting and shadowing the individual elements of that material. So yes, even over the blue and over the yellow, I'm going to go ahead and offer a shadow of pucker all along the edge where I've used my stitching over any color within that block. So you could definitely pick up a different colored pencil for each section of that material, because the pucker, of course, wouldn't necessarily be blue if I'm going over red, but I'm being okay with using the blue as an overall shadow. So however you see that shadow or depth coming into play for your Ahoy spaces, that's exactly what you should be doing. Don't second guess your creativity. Allow your voice to speak, right? Having so much fun putting these together and seeing each quilt block come to be, having my collection grow week after week. I think once I get to 10, I'll lay out what I have and just start playing with the tiles to kind of visually see how they all fit together. I believe today is our first bright red border, because I think I've mentioned before, I'm trying to change it up a bit so that all of them don't come in at blue and green, which is kind of, I think, where I kind of started. So for the last 40, I want to change that up a bit and bring other colors into our borders. Yeah. All right, so I'm going into that nutmeg section, and nutmeg is this beautiful brownie color, but on the edges, it has an kind of army greeny color to it. So I'm going to offer artichoke, that 1098 color, right into that brown section of nutmeg. And this is just going to represent as a whole that yellowy tint, or greeny tint, I should say, to our nutmeg. So I'm not going to go again into each individual oval. You can, but I'm going to focus more on that pinch, or our um, sewn edge. Circular motion, kind of blending it out. A little bit of a subtle green hue right to the edge. Of course, you can make it as deep or as subtle as you want it to be, right? Or again, you could definitely be shading each individual orb, or nutmeg in this case. And if you think that this shading is so subtle, why are we bothering? Again, great opportunity halfway through to see our why. Take that pause, change that perspective, And yes, it's subtle, but it's there. And it adds such a great pop or depth into each one of these triangular sections. It's there. You're making a difference. Very little tingling in today's piece. Simple tingling, but check in on that breath and that heartbeat. Has it changed from where you started? I venture to guess it has. That repetitious pen stitching definitely lends a hand into that mindfulness and that ability to slow down. So there we have it, our Connecticut quilt block. Ooh, ah. Once again, offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this opportunity. Sign your chop, your initials, your signature, however you own your artwork. And until next time, I appreciate you. Thank you.